In Ophelis Hall, Taylor visited Zix in his dormitory. Seeing him, Zix then asked, "What's wrong?" Taylor asked him to help him. He didn't seem to be in a good condition at the moment. With eyes full of determination, Taylor said that they had to save Isla, the last chapter of Act 2 of The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania, Phase 1, The Pursuit of Glast. After exiting the Tricks Hall and losing the whereabouts of Professor Glast, Taylor then asked Zix for help. In the strategy guide, in one of the additional completion conditions in Phase 1, Taylor had to cooperate with Zix. And for the achievement goal in Phase 2, he had to pursue Professor Glast, who was hiding in the underground waterway. Soon, Taylor and his friends who followed him will enter the underground waterway to pursue Professor Glast. The route of the last chapter of Act 2 is familiar: Tricks Hall, underground waterway, Soul Library, Monster Research Side, and finally the deepest part of the laboratory. Twisting this route feels quite interesting. Usually, the Monster Research Side was a troublesome area because Kun released all the monsters, but because his route was now reversed, all the monsters were still locked, so he could just pass by. He felt grateful for that. The meeting between Lucy and Professor Glast was destined to end badly, so he had to hurry. But the problem is, the Soul Library is guarded by Reina, the librarian of the Soul Library, a banshee. Ed is hiding to avoid being detected by her. Reina's patrol pattern is quite familiar, even if the battle happens later. He has memorized some strategies against her, so he can handle it, but Reina the librarian is a valuable EXP for Taylor. In the next round, enemies that can only be defeated by Taylor's swordsmanship will appear. If the protagonist Taylor is not well trained, it will interfere with the progress of the scenario. The last chapter of Act 2 is the segment where Taylor must develop the most. This is an episode that is an important basis for the next scenario, so a player should play it to the end without missing it, especially the revived demon of the underground waterway, and Reina, who provided the most EXP, had to be defeated by Taylor. So, as it went on, he had to take only the essential magic engineering tools and then sneak out, such as the thunderclap generator placed in column C. While Reina was patrolling casually while humming a song, Ed was now reading the library manual to find out the layout of the items. Next, the undirectional light dimming device. Ed then thought that he really had to come back here after all this was done. While glancing in a direction towards the magic engineering that he had not taken, he felt very sorry about it. Mug said, "Now, the exit should be open." Ed said that was good. He then invited him to go out. But, just as he was about to walk out of there, the room suddenly shook violently. Seeing that, Ed wondered, was this an earthquake? He didn't remember this kind of event, and the table that had been hiding his existence suddenly collapsed. Ed was stunned while breaking out in a cold sweat, seeing that, without any obstacles that were now hiding him, Reina then finally saw his existence. She then shouted very loudly. Ed could only curse, seeing that, 30 minutes before the earthquake, in the Tricks Hall, the main conference room, there was a well-dressed man who was scared when he saw a very large golem about to attack him, but fortunately, before the golem's attack could land, it was first frozen by someone. That person was Lortel. She said, if this deal did not happen silently, the reputation of the Sylvania Academy would have been messed up. How could the scroll be stolen when all the main academy staff were gathered here? Hearing her disappointed tone, Principal Obel said, it might take a little time, but he will take responsibility and retrieve the scroll. He asked her to wait for a while. Whatever Professor Glast is planning, it still won't end well for him. Lortel could only be confused to hear that. Principal Obel explained, looking at the situation, they should at least tell her merchant company the minimum facts. He then asked, does she know the 3 great taboos: distorting the principles of the world, disrupting the current flow of time, and rejecting the framework of human destiny? Those are the 3 great taboos, such as aiming for immortality, rising from the dead, and turning back time. Lortel was then shocked to hear that. She then asked, could Professor Glast use celestial magic to resurrect someone? She was confused. He should have known. But why? Even though Lortel didn't finish her sentence, but Principal Obel knew. Did he want to ask him if he was crazy for leaving Professor Glast alone? Principal Obel said that he was curious. He always said that those talented individuals drove the progress of the world. The great sage of this era, Sylvania, whom he revered and admired, and Muri, his daughter, who died a horrible death because he went too far in pushing her, believing in her talent, which was still ambiguous. If he had really perfected the celestial magic to resurrect the dead, He then asked her, who did she think Professor Glass would resurrect? Lortel could only fall silent hearing that. She knew who he was referring to. Shortly after that, someone then came in and reported to Principal Abel, "They have a problem." A few minutes ago, Taylor started chasing Professor Glass, who ran into the underground waterway, according to eyewitnesses. Not only were the scrolls stolen but students were also kidnapped. The students seen were first-year student, Isla Triss of the Faculty of Magic, and second-year student of the Faculty of Magic, Ed Roth Taylor. Lortel was then shocked to hear that a very loud noise was suddenly heard. She was really surprised to hear that Ed was kidnapped, and this loud noise and vibration. Principal Abel is the greatest magician of this era. He said he would take the sage's scroll himself. If he intervened, he could save Ed easily, so waiting here was the most rational course of action. But Lortel certainly wouldn't do that. After guessing, she then knew these familiar sounds and vibrations were coming from the direction of the underground waterway. After looking with her binoculars, she then saw the fire spirit, Tarkan. She also saw Janica who was riding him. Lortel then said that she will go. Her subordinates were then surprised to hear that. Lortel said, since the principal continued to address this so indifferently, she would take the skull herself. She then told her subordinates who were there to follow her, but she told the negotiation members to stay here. Lortel Ketchum, entering the scenario, was recognized even by the alchemy faculty for her combat ability. Dorothy, the top-ranked third-year student of the alchemy faculty, Dorothy's combat ability was respected even by the students of the combat faculty, and even the first-year best alchemy student Elvira and the second-year best student Norton often asked for her guidance. However, Dorothy did not stand out when she was in the first grade. Therefore, Professor Glass, who knew her talent, really became the driving force. Dorothy believed that Professor Glass, no matter how radical his actions were, had certain good intentions. Although she did not know his true intentions, she really wanted to fulfill Professor Glass's request to guard the underground waterway entrance well. But, looking at the scene that was now in front of her, she felt that this was too much. Despair could be seen clearly on her face. In front of her at this time, there was the fire spirit, Tarkan, who looked at her with an intimidating gaze, and Janica, who was now on top of Tarkan, then told her to answer her. With a terrible look in her eyes, she asked, "Where is Ed?" Dorothy was so scared that foam came out of her mouth, and she then just fainted. Tarkan or whoever it was said this way. Janica was not sure who she heard it from earlier. She then remembered again, right at the second fork, then left right, but she was dizzy when she remembered, and when she looked back at the person she had been afraid of earlier, she was then surprised because it turned out to be Dorothy, a top third-year student from the alchemy faculty. Seeing her who had collapsed on the ground, Janica wondered, is this her fault? She then thought she should at least cover her with something, but she was then surprised when she suddenly heard someone calling her from behind. It was Lortel. She had apparently arrived there with her entourage. When she saw the scene, Lortel thought, speaking of Janica Fay Lover, besides Lucy, among all the top students in all grades, she has the most impressive combat power, the Sylvania Academy's ace card. She will destroy the entire underground waterway, and no matter what, she will save Ed. So, Lortel then imagined a future that she absolutely did not want to happen, while holding Ed. Janica said that she had come to save him. She then asked, was he hurt? Was he suffering? She was very worried. She then invited Ed to come back together. She had made the dishes in the cabin. While blushing, Ed then told Janica that she was the best. Suddenly being kidnapped was very bad. She was the only one. Ed then asked Janica to get married. He even asked, did she want to have a girl or a boy? Lortel really didn't want that to happen. Lortel could usually make cold and rational decisions, but when it came to Ed, her rationality decreased. Lortel then approached Janica and whispered that Ed had been rescued. It was upsetting, but it seemed that he was seriously injured when he was kidnapped. He was lying in bed wondering when she would come. Right now in the cabin, Janica was then shocked to hear that. Seeing that, Lortel then slyly thought she would save Ed. First, she had to get rid of Janica first. But, Janica certainly did not believe her words so easily. With a sharp gaze directed at her, Janica asked, why did she tell her that? She also added, right after Ed's location was found, she immediately rushed here. She was almost at the entrance, so how could Ed have been saved? She was the one who came here first, so who saved him without her knowing? Janica is usually slow, but her brain works fast when it comes to Ed. Hearing her question, Lortel just casually told her to forget what she just said. Seeing her attitude, Janica then told her that this is not the time for this. She also asked, she brought the employees of her company not to look for Ed, right? After all, those employees are not fighters. Janica said it would be dangerous if she brought them. Lortel was upset to hear that. Suddenly, everything she said made sense. It was true that this was also dangerous for her. Janica continued, she originally asked Lucy for help, but Lucy yawned and instead walked somewhere. She didn't like listening to others and acted at her own pace, so that meant she was alone. The competition between the two girls was really very hot. Lortel then realized and suggested they should not bother each other now. Hearing Janica's words made Lortel realize that there was no other competitor other than her. She then told all the subordinates she brought to stay here and wait. The two girls seemed to have agreed. Janica said she would search on the east side of the underground waterway, while Lortel said she would search on the opposite side. Needless to say, the important thing now was to save Ed, who was in danger. Therefore, at full speed, they were determined to save Ed first. Ed was now facing danger because he had been discovered by Reina. The question then arose, who would save Ed, who was in danger first? But the roof above them suddenly cracked, and a very powerful magic then emerged from that position, which then hit Reina. Ed was really surprised to see such a powerful magic. He even thought that it was still better than an earthquake. Reina could only lie on the ground while being hit by the rubble, whether she was alive or dead, while yawning. Lucy, as the cause of all this, then said to him, she was bored, so she came to save him, while the two girls were racing to find Ed. It turned out that there was a third girl who had found him first.